Of course, I wanted to play all that. That's awesome. Great suggestion by Mike. Fire up a little Mr. Crowley, little Ozzy Osbourne, Randy Rhoads back in the day. Yeah, that's right, Keith. Um, oh yeah, I remember. I remember Keith. I got a huge like packet of original Randy Rhoads photos from the local record store growing up. I'm 54. We're probably close in age. Huge Ozzy fan, and I got all these. I don't know what the heck I did with them. I managed to hold on to like the most random junk, but cannot find my original Randy Rhoads photos. I had some. I didn't take them, but I bought them. But they were the original, old school photo mat stuff with the markings on the back. Like, just I don't know. There's like 15 of them. Just great shots of Randy. And I thought I was trying to pull this up or find it on my email, but my good buddy, Michael Sudduth, who's a philosophy PhD professor at San Francisco State, who helps me with my Zodiac stuff and teaching me how to make the most sound, logical arguments for, the Cheney theory and everything like that. Probably one of the smartest people I know, without a doubt. It was still a pretty avid guitar player, plays a Strat, but back in the day, he was a metal guy. And here's a picture of Michael. Let me try to like level that out because I wanted to pull it up, but like everything I do, I got to do it like reverse when I'm on camera. But look at that guitar he's playing. That's made by the same guy that made Randy's guitar that he was playing in that Mr. Crowley video. It's custom. It's not a Gibson. That was a custom that polka dotted V. And Michael had an identical guitar made by the same guy that he would shred on. So yeah, that's Professor Sudduth right there, shredding on the same Randy Rhoads polka dotted V, which is so awesome. And he was a big Randy guy. And I can't remember. He told me who made it, but he had one back in the day when he used to play metal and stuff like that, which is so cool. Yeah, I'll ask Michael again who made that guitar, but it's the same exact, just like Randy, same guy made it. And because he was such a Randy fan, he wanted that guitar. So, man, total, I love that song. So great suggestion by Mike. So yeah, we're gonna talk about Mr. Crowley for sure, Aleister Crowley, and this was because a lot of people send me cool stuff that I haven't thought about before. So that's what this show is all about, is sending that stuff in and crowdsourcing or throwing the ideas out in the chat. Carl Sandoval, I think that sounds familiar, Keith. I think that's it. Yeah, I bet it is. I'll ask Michael. And if he marks the guitars or any, you know what? I mean, one thing I've never asked Michael is if he still has that guitar, because I'm sure it's worth a mint. So, Michael, if you're watching, let me know if you still have that guitar. But yeah, you're right, Keith. That was the name. It rings a bell for sure. So one thing that brought this up, and people contact me different ways. Sometimes always email me if you want to email me. It's just drewbeeson@yahoo.com. It's the easiest way. But some people find me on um, Facebook Messenger, or they'll find me on Instagram. And I think this one came in through Instagram. This gentleman who watches the show, but there's a lot of people that watch that don't necessarily get into. Oh, well, how's the audio doing, by the way? Because sometimes when I play a live or like I share a screen like that, it'll screw it up. So let me know if uh, if the audio is cutting out or not, because sometimes that'll happen. So this is from a gentleman going under Transylvanian Creations, and he said, "Hi, Drew. I'm 100% on board with the Don Chaney theory. Has anyone looked into the fact that killing for slaves in the afterlife comes from Aleister Crowley?" And actually, I think it's Crowley is how it's pronounced, from the Thelemites, and we'll talk about that some more. But actually, despite the song, I think it's actually pronounced Crowley and not Crowley. So I might go back and forth by mistake, but I'm going to try to say Crowley, because that's the way that his followers, I think, pronounce it. But it says, has anyone looked into the fact that killing for slaves in the afterlife comes from Aleister Crowley's Book of the Law? I have a strong feeling, Cheney or not, was a follower of Crowley. And that got my attention immediately. And it's just something that rings right. Because we've always tried to figure out where any Zodiac jargon comes from. Because, we talked, of course, on this show a lot We look into, Alfred Hitchcock and Tim Holt and all this kind of thing. But we've always wondered where slaves in the afterlife. Of course, he says slaves in paradise once. Where does this come from? I think the Vikings kind of had a concept like that. Maybe the Egyptians. I've heard one person even claim Mormonism once had something like it, which I never could find the one about Mormonism had something like that, which I don't think so. But there was a story about a guy that knew a Mormon. But when this guy said it could come from Crowley, he had my attention right there. I was like, never knew that, never thought, because I've never read. I'm familiar with him, but I haven't read that particular book or know his writings that much. So he said, we talked a little bit about it, and he said he believes that it's probably from the Crowley's Book of Law. In the middle of, he was going to send me the different pages and stuff like that, but he was in the middle of moving and show me his different scriptures where this particular concept of slaves in the afterlife come from. And I told him that I had a friend that is a Thelemite, and it's Stefan Nyberg that we talk about, who's a Zodiac Killer researcher. He is a Thelemite. He's a follower of Crowley. So I said, hey, I know a Zodiac Killer researcher that's also a follower of the teachings of Aleister Crowley. So he's definitely going to know about this stuff. And so sure enough, I asked him. So this conversation continued. I said that, I was going to reach out to Stefan. And then he put, if I recall, the bulk of it is in the second chapter, verses 50-ish. It also talks about changing the English alphabet into symbols of your own. That's interesting. Etc. Zodiac ciphers, just his own observation, though. I'm always looking forward to your live shows, Q&A. Take care, brother. So that was really cool. And there's something about it rang true. So, of course, I reached out to Stefan, and I knew he would be able to get to the bottom of this as somebody that knows Zodiac and Crowley very well. So I said, and then we were talking about something else too, going back to some of the celestial navigation stuff. So I wrote this to Stefan. I put, someone just asked me if I was aware that slaves in the afterlife is mentioned in Crowley's The Book of Law. Have you seen that reference? And he wrote back, he said, yep, slaves are for sure mentioned in the Book of the Law. We Thelemites often refer to it as liber al, as it's Latin for liber al vel leges. I'm sure I'm butchering that, but it's liber, capital Al, lowercase vel, and then another word, capital legis. And it puts number 49. I am unique and conqueror. I am not of the slaves that perish, but they damned and dead. Amen. This is of the four there, and there is a fifth who is invisible, and therein I am as a babe in the egg. 54. Nor shall they who cry aloud their folly that thou meanest not avail. Thou shalt reveal it. Thou availest. They are the slaves of because they are not of me. The stops as thou wilt, the letters, change them not in style or value. 58. Yea, deem not of change. Ye shall be as ye are, and not other. Therefore, the kings of the earth shall be kings forever. The slaves shall serve. There is none that shall be cast down or lifted up. All is ever as it was. Yet there are masked ones, my servants. It may be that yonder beggar is a king. A king may choose his garment as he will. There is no certain test, but a beggar cannot hide his poverty. If you interpret passages 49 and 54, they could indeed mean that the slaves are to serve you even in the afterlife. These passages are all found in the second chapter of Liber AL. So there you have it. So he knows the stuff pretty well. Could be a source of it. Yes, Jimmy Page did buy Crowley's house on Loch Ness, and Jimmy Page was definitely a heavy follower of his. And maybe that was the source, because when you go back to all things Zodiac, they are what? A lot of the influences seem to be old in English. Number one, you're going to think of Gilbert and Sullivan, which is the late 1800s, both Englishmen. Mikado, English, of course. I believe, of course, Agatha Christie's ABC Murders. You're talking about 20s and 30s English. You have Crowley's writings coming out, I think, in the 20s and 30s as well, kind of similar to Agatha Christie. And then I understand that Crowley was also very interested in Jack the Ripper, which a lot of people think the Zodiac was. So could very well be uh, what's inspiring him to do that. If there's any connection, I think I just accidentally called Stefan. Sorry, man. I just had your thing up. That's what I hate about Messenger. He starts butt dialing everybody. It's probably 4 a.m. where he is. My bad, dude. So keeping along this line of inquiry, as it would have it, there is let me bring this up. I want to put this up. This is a website I ran across, and it says the many faces of the Zodiac. And yes, it is talking about the Zodiac Killer, not the signs of the Zodiac. And it's called Aleister Crowley's Influence on the Zodiac Murders. And I thought, wow. I mean, so this is taking me down this trail. I'm going to read some of this. Let me pull up the website. And it's a strange website. I'll try to put the link down in the comments. And it says, when one studies Aleister Crowley, it becomes very obvious how he influenced all the characters in the Zodiac murders. His philosophies and objectives obviously stick out in all the Zodiac's writings. If the COS is truly who is behind the Zodiac killings, I don't even know who that is, truly is behind the Zodiac killings, then a quick study of Crowley's beliefs will fill in any missing holes as to the whys and what fors of this agenda. To me, the crux of all of this is the formation of the New World Order, or the Luciferian agenda. I think Plate C, you're kind of into that, and Ross as well. Explaining the reason why evil is the ordinary condition in political endeavors usually gets the response that evil is not real. This is the supreme deception. The Aleister Crowley hymn to Lucifer exemplifies the new age of the New World Order, where nor of good nor ill what aim hath act. Without its climax death, what savor hath? Life, an impeccable machine exact. He paces an inane and pointless path. To glut brute appetites his sole content. How tedious were he fit to comprehend himself. More, this our noble element. Of fire in nature, love and spirit. There's, at least a mention of fire, like by fire, by knife, by rope. A fire in nature, love and spirit, unkeened. Life have no spring, no axle, and no end. His body a bloody ruby radiant. It's going to radiate, kind of similar to radiant. With noble passion, sun-souled Lucifer, swept through the dawn, colossal, swift, aslant. On Eden's impeccable perimeter, he blessed non-entity with every curse, and spiced with sorrow the dull soul of sense. Breathed life into the sterile universe. With love and knowledge, drove out innocence. The key of joy is disobedience. Notice the similarities with the little list letter of the Zodiac. I'm going to put up a copy of that. Of course, that's one of the most famous of the Zodiac correspondences, and that was on July 26th, which is my birthday. This was a year later. I was born in 69, but on July 26, 1970, the Zodiac mailed a letter to the San Francisco Chronicle that eerily has the same thread through it. Like the Exorcist letter, which blatantly claims a satanic connection, the list letter makes a statement of what they are going to do with those who did not follow Crowley's direction of what one must do to be in the NWO, of course, this New World Order. Does it specifically say Crowley? No. If one reads between the lines, it quickly becomes evident that this is a directive that is similar to all those allegiances that have been formed to follow the directive. Crowley and his ideas have slipped into every aspect of society. Now is the perpetuation of the Georgia Guidestones directives. Of course, this is probably written before the Georgia Guidestones got blown to smithereens. This clearly says that this group of Crowley devotees were the brains behind the Zodiac Killer phenomenon, and they had a affiliation with groups involved with the Illuminati. And I get these messages a lot. People that believe that this is MK Ultra, Illuminati, that this is a group. Somebody wrote me the other day, said this whole group of serial killings that were going on in the mid 60s to mid 70s, the Manson murders, it all ties in. I know Professor Horan kind of ties a lot of that in. And I that is a huge belief out there. And I get those emails all the time. It says those in the New World Order who are in control of most governments of the world, already today declare that to become a citizen of this order will require a Luciferian oath. Accordingly, those in the implementation stages proclaim no one will enter the New World Order unless he or she make a pledge to worship Lucifer. No one will enter the New Age unless he will take a Luciferian initiation. David Spangler, Director of Planetary Initiative, United Nations. Unless eaters are those who are disposed of who do not follow or fit into the stringent rules of being in the club. On the Georgia Guidestones, there is a list. That's a good point. There is a little list. And of course, the number one was maintain humanity under 500 million in perpetual balance with nature. Of course, that was, everyone, population control, Bill Gates, that whole thing. Number two, guide reproduction wisely, improving fitness and diversity. Three, unite humanity with a living new language, rule, passion, faith, tradition, and all things with tempered reason. And then, I'm sure everybody's seen the rules on the Georgia Guidestones before, but I will mention number 10 that was on the Georgia Guidestones. It says, be not a cancer on the earth, leave room for nature, leave room for nature. It says that twice, but there's cancer coming up again. Planned eugenics is the first directive. When one reads little list letter, it is a clear separation of desirable from undesirable. There is now a plan in effect to eliminate 6.5 billion people to get the Earth's population down to 500 million people. Aleister Crowley was obsessed with Jack the Ripper and influenced the next generation of his devoted subjects to follow in his murderous footsteps. All of these devoted subjects who followed Crowley seemed to have a murderous rampage following around them. Kenneth Anger's gay lover was incarcerated for murder. Wasn't that Kenneth Anger the one that Horan mentions with the snuff film at Berryessa and all that? Wasn't that Kenneth Anger? I don't know. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong or put it in the comments. Kenneth Anger's gay lover was incarcerated for murder. Charles Manson and the family had murders following around them. All of the high-level priests like Anton LaVey and Aquino, it's Aquino, it's Michael Aquino, it's not Aquino, it's Aquino, had crime and murder following them. Was this a coincidence or a part of a directive from one of the most evil men in Earth's history? A directive that will eventually align a new world order under the Luciferian objective. So there's more about it in here, but that's interesting that he equates Georgia Guidestones to the Little List letter. He equates Aleister Crowley to Little List. And then we had the stuff we were just talking about with slaves in the afterlife. Could that have been something Zodiac was into, no matter who it is? Like the guy said at the beginning, Cheney or not, is this something that the Zodiac was into? Absolutely could have been. Absolutely. When it's all this old English stuff. I don't know if they ever mentioned it in the Myth of the Zodiac, the TV show I was in with Professor Horan, but I was told, and I honestly still haven't watched it at all. I watched most of my parts, but I've not watched every piece of it. But one thing that Andrew Knock told me, the producer, was that the guys that were doing the study of the letters, the guy in Germany and that team, or France, that they believed the Zodiac had read a book by a guy named Barnes Barnaby called, it's a play called The Devil's Charter, which was kind of an anti-Catholic, anti-Pope type of play that was written 400 years ago or so, like Shakespeare time. Seems to kind of fit in with some Crowley and the Book of Law, things like that. It's old, it's English, just like the Mikado and somewhat, Jack the Ripper. We've got Agatha Christie, and there's just so much this stuff in England at that time. So it's just something you can't rule out. I've never, who doesn't know Professor Horan is here? Yeah, maybe he is, but there he is, Professor Horan. I'm glad we're talking about. See, so I wonder if the professor's ever seen that site that I was reading from, but it could be old English. I don't know. Tell me, Professor, if they ever brought up that part about the Barnes Barnaby and the Devil's Charter, which just plays into all this old English stuff. And you can't rule out Crowley. I mean, I never personally saw a satanic agenda within the crimes, and I've said that I never really saw that before, but maybe there's clues, maybe there's some stuff out there. I'm definitely open to it, especially after looking at more of this Crowley stuff. And I want Stefan to go back and do more, because I know he's got all the Crowley books, and now when you're reading them in the Book of Law and stuff like that, see if you can find some more connections to to Zodiac. Professor said Charles A. Lindbergh Sr., real name Charles Manson Jr., and you're not kidding. If that's true, I want to see it, Professor. Was it about white supremacist and eugenicists? Yeah, Lindbergh was absolutely a white supremacist and eugenicist. And of course, it came out later that Charles Lindbergh had fathered all, I mean, I don't know what's the number, Professor, how many was it, 18 children in Germany that he had fathered. And I was always of the belief, and I've studied the Lindbergh baby kidnapping quite a bit. I can't remember. Noreen had the author of a book called Hauptmann's Ladder. Of course, it's about Lindbergh, and that was Bruno Charles Hauptmann was of course, the person convicted of kidnapping Lindbergh's baby. But I always felt that Hauptmann was hired. That was a setup. Of course, I don't think he was planning to get caught when they found the banknote that wasn't typical, and the person at the gas station wrote down the numbers from the banknote that was given to them, and that's how it led to Hauptmann's capture. But I always felt that Lindbergh, being this eugenicist and the fact that the Lindbergh baby had rickets and it wasn't fully healthy, maybe he planned for the kidnapping of his own baby, or possibly murder. And when they took the baby, the ladder fell and the baby dropped on the ground or something and wound up killing it. Of course, they found the baby not far away from the house, deceased. And I always wondered if Hauptmann wasn't hired to do this, because there's so many weird things around it. But yeah, Lindbergh was an absolute eugenicist, fathered so many kids in Germany that it came out later. And it still didn't get publicized that much, because Lindbergh was a hero. I mean, he was an absolute most famous person on the earth after he had done his flight. And that's what happened when when the baby got kidnapped. It was insane. There was multiple phrases and things that echo Jacobite literature for sure. The letters that Avery and Cheney apparently wrote. Yes. I don't know about Avery. Maybe that's why he said Avery Lee. He wanted it to make it look like Averly and Lee. Tony, paradise, COS is a body, but also to certain officials such as H.P. Blanche Barton, Magister Peter H. Gilmore, Reverends Lestat Ventru, Matt G. Paradise, the usual saying, and I can't even pronounce these right, and Andrew P. Schlesinger. Interesting, Tony. I'm going to have to go back and read all of that. What are you saying, Jerome? You're also here, but you're a BAM pot. What is a BAM pot, Jerome? Is that like some Crowley language? Could have been. Sounds like a frustrated Don used those examples to elevate himself from his miserable life. Yes, and when he wasn't telling crazy lies about Arthur Lee Allen flying into the Sears Tower before the Sears Tower was even built. Bampot, I fancy you as a Pop and J. Hey, Anthony. Lindbergh fathered a total of 13 children. Thanks, Anthony. Fathered a total of 13 children throughout his life, 6 with longtime wife Anne Morrow, and 7 other children with separate European women out of wedlock. Okay, thanks for getting the numbers straight. I knew it was quite a bit. But yeah, that's a lot. But I just always wondered with Lindbergh that there's too much going on there. The way that Hauptmann got caught, the guy that went to the park and all that. And wasn't it just, it was the night that the baby got kidnapped was just a very rare night that Lindbergh was going to a speaking engagement. So they don't know if maybe the maid tipped it off or that Lindbergh was involved in it, because they knew exactly the night to go to that other residence. I can't remember the names of 2 different residences, either the one that was his and the one that was in his wife's family, but they weren't even supposed to be at that particular residence. And he would have been home, but he had a speaking engagement. So it's like there was somebody was tipped or knew that he wouldn't be home the night that the baby was taken. But it's been a while. I might have that guy on, the guy that wrote Hauptmann's Ladder. That is a great book. The guy has gone on the deepest dive as you could possibly take into Charles Lindbergh. Now, he doesn't go around saying anything crazy like me that Lindbergh might have absolutely was involved in the kidnapping of his own son, but I say it. I say it for sure because he was a strange guy and could have absolutely done it. Howman was a legal immigrant who entered the U.S. via the same underground railroad as the Deutsche Speiring. I don't butchering these words tonight. That yeah, he wasn't a legal immigrant. That's for sure. And then he also is proven was had done some robberies in Germany using a ladder, just like they used the ladder to climb up to get the Limburg baby. And they said that one of his ruses would be pushing a fake baby along in a baby carriage, and I mean all kind of weird stuff. When they wrote Averly, it's because it sounds like Lee at the end. I've seen that proposed a lot. It was a subtle clue to ALA being the Zodiac. I've seen that a lot. You can see the phonetic Lee all over Zodiac correspondence everywhere. Yeah, you're up late, Jerome. It's almost 4 a.m. in the morning for the Zodcast. You're dedicated, Jerome. Professor Horn. Charles Manson Sr. became a right-wing Democratic congressman who, y'all are using big words just from English professors, vociferously opposed the Federal Reserve and America's entry into World War I. That's see, Professor knows so many things that tie things together. Thanks, Jerome. And then, Jerome, you're always the first to put the link out on Facebook too, so I appreciate that. Highfeld. There were some weird things going on with the maid, evidently, but I do not think Lambert had anything to do with his own son. You're not a conspiracy guy, Anthony, like I am. I don't know. There's some strange stuff that went on there. There really did. Well, who was the what was in that the guy's name? The doctor or whatever, whoever he was. The guy, the one that went to the park with the money. There's some weird stuff going around there. That's a great book. Hauptmann's Ladder. Let me know if the audio is holding up. There is a book called Cemetery John. That's right. About Hauptmann's accomplice could have been. It seems very convincing. Yes, Cemetery John. I know they talk about him a lot in Hauptmann's Ladder, and the guy is on Paranormal Zone TV. If you look for that, that's Noreen's show. I was supposed to be on that show with them, but I was having some technical problems. I think it worked out better that went three of us because it would have really put a drag on the feed. But if you go to Paranormal Zone TV and type in Hauptmann's Ladder or the Limburg kidnapping, I think that show was like about a year ago, Patty, something like that. Yes, Jerome. Yes, I will get you one. I'll figure out a way to get it to Belgium. It's not easy, but I'm going to make it happen. So Duchenne was a Nazi spy ring who stole secrets from the Norden bomb site, etc. Sam Carr was a sergeant in base security when the Norden was tested. Yeah, I've seen a lot about Son of Sam and the Cars was coming up lately. That's not how you spell it, Plate C, but I see what you mean. There's a lot to cogitate here. There you go. You fixed it. Since we have I know we have at least a few teachers here and maybe 2 college professors. I'll get it to you, Jerome. I haven't been marketing it, but I'll get you one. Best book on Limerick case is Kidnapped by Walker. I think that's his name. I haven't heard of that one, but I'll check it out. Should have just missed like 18 comments with that click. Yeah, the doctor was very suspect. He was very suspect. The way he was always there. Voice could be clearer. Oh, let me see. Let me try this. I might be too close to the mic. Tony, I am not a conspiracy theorist, but it sounds like something a Nazi would do. Yeah, Tony, I can vouch for that. Tony is not a conspiracy theorist. He really isn't. Yep, about a year ago, says Patty. Yeah, check about a year ago on Paranormal Zone TV for that show with that gentleman that wrote that book. He really knows his stuff. And there was something about the furniture that they found, and there was something at the end about this other potential accomplice of Hauptmann in the Limburg baby kidnapping. Dr. Condon. That's right. Thanks, Professor. High school principal and football coach. He inserted himself into the case by contacting the kidnappers on his own through the papers. That's right. He did. That guy is highly suspect. I mean, The fact that Condon could have known Hauptmann is I mean, didn't the guy at the park, didn't the guy at the park was speaking German? And Hauptmann didn't speak much English at all. I think he was primarily spoke German even after being here as long as he was. I definitely think something was going on. Condon was very creepy. I mean, I'm definitely not an expert on the Lindbergh kidnapping, but I would not put it past him. He was a strange guy. Yeah, we do. We need to do a UFO show, Jerome. Now the most normal thing being talked about in the media is UFOs. Thank you. I think I just had it a little too close, but at least it isn't doing what it did last week. Lindbergh also passed secrets of imperial guidance developed by Robert Goddard to Nazis after the Hauptmann trial. That's interesting. And that's another thing about Hauptmann. He would never admit it. He would not break, even in prison, even though he knew he was going to be executed, would not admit it. I mean, I know he had a son. I don't know if I think he only had one son, if I'm not mistaken, but maybe it was for the legacy of that son. Did not want him to, he didn't want his son to think that he had something to do with it. But Hauptmann absolutely refused to confess. So he, chose death. Did not want to give it up. Von Braun invented the same system a couple months after he met Lindbergh. I'm with Professor Horn on here. I don't trust Lindbergh. Your theory is that ALA, DH, and Guy somehow knew each other, and they are the three guys that committed the murders. Hey, you might as well throw in Fred Manali while you're at it. Fred Manali had a lot. He was offered $1 million for his family if he confessed. If I had read that, I'd forgotten that, Professor, but he wouldn't do it. Yeah, he wouldn't confess or take the money. Maybe they knew if he did, they were going to kill him even in prison. I don't know. There's more going on with him. There's definitely more. It just couldn't have been him by himself. I mean, they knew where the baby would be. They knew the timing. It was odd that that was one particular night that Lindbergh had a speaking engagement. And definitely watch that show if you don't want to get the book. It's a good show because he covers everything in the kidnapping and he knows it really well. Definitely something a Nazi would do. You can't trust the Nazis. Yeah, we definitely need to do a UFO show, Jerome. Hope you feel better, Keith. There's a theory that because the child was autistic. I heard I don't know if the word autistic even existed back then, but I know they said the child had rickets and was taking vitamin C or something for the rickets. Maybe it did have some early form of autism. I mean, I don't even know if that was a phrase back then. Of course, a lot of people believe autism didn't come up until all the vaccinations. Not to get more conspiracy on you, but I don't know. Autism certainly wasn't around a lot back then. And not if the perfect baby, he may have had his child killed. Sorry if this was already discussed while you're away. Yeah, that's what I was saying, Keith. That's what I think may have happened. I don't trust Lindbergh. I just don't. I do not trust him. He was a eugenicist. I think he absolutely could have been involved in his child's kidnapping. Maybe he didn't plan on the child being killed. Maybe they dropped the baby from the house. Your theory that Don Cheney was a killer and Santos Panzarella was writing the letters. Panzarella had a lot of insecurities about him. Hello, Drew. What has Ryan Burns been up to? He's always working on something interesting. Chris, as far as I know, Ryan is still obsessed with DB Cooper, and he always will be, which is great. We need that. And Ryan is currently still arguing. I guess arguing would be the right word on the drop zone, or maybe not so much the DB Cooper forum, but definitely on the drop zone. He's arguing about, and all those guys like to argue with each other over there. All the long-term DB Cooper guys that are hardcore, and they're arguing about the parachutes. And I think that was it for sure a 26-foot canopy and different things with the parachutes. I don't. They're still arguing about all things Earl Causey and Norm Hayden and of the parachutes. And I think they've been stuck on that for about 4 weeks. So that's what Ryan's doing. I think probably right now is going over DB Cooper's parachutes. James Philip Crabtree worked in the same Albany newspaper building as Gaikowski. Yeah, I remember something about that. But that was definitely Crabtree. It wasn't Dean. It wasn't Dean Farron, right? I mean, Dean Farron was a cook, obviously. So I don't know why he would have been there. So that was when he was married to Darlene. Professor said the baby had several birth defects. His corpse was identified by his hammer toes. I didn't know that. Wasn't the baby in the mortuary or something? And people were like, there was so much media around it. They were trying to break in or something. Or I can't remember something about that. But that's interesting that his corpse was identified by his hammer toes. I thought there was something else that identified him, a blanket or a sack. It was called a sleep sack, I think, like kind of like a baby sleeping bag. And I think that was still with the corpse of the Lindbergh baby when they found him. That had part of the sleep sack was how they first identified him. I mean, I never heard about the part about the hammer toes, but Lindbergh, if that kid wasn't perfect, it bothered him. There's no doubt. Hauptmann was so prideful. I think he figured someone would finally get him out. Narcissist. Okay, vitamin B for rickets. Thank you. I know I know you know your vitamins. He couldn't stand his skull hadn't closed. Wow, I definitely never heard that. Yeah, if he was that bad off, I really think Lindbergh had something to do with it. See, Chris, sadly involved, and you're warming to it. Yeah, the more you find out, I want to have that guy on that wrote that book. He knows Lindbergh so well. I've only read about Lindy and his practical jokes. Don't believe it. Oh, thanks, Patty. There's the link. You can probably click on that link. It'll go to that episode with the guy that wrote the book, Hauptmann's Ladder. He really did an amazing job with that book. And I think it's only 2 or 3 years old. So it's not like a 20, 30-year-old book. He had everything, available to him in modern times to really study the trial and what happened that night in Cemetery John and the doctor, and just really went through it. And he doesn't try to sell you on a theory or anything like that. He just brings up different interesting facts. The ladder was made of rickety boards. That's interesting. The kid had rickets and rickety boards. I heard, yeah, what was it called? Like rail. They found was it rail? Whoever remembers this is good if you can remember without looking it up. Was it rail 13, whatever they called it? The rail 13 is what they were going to get him on, because that's the piece they found in Hauptmann's house that matched the ladder. It was like rail 13. I heard the ladder wouldn't support much weight. Yeah, I think there's a TV show that built a similar ladder and they tested it. And they might have even used the actual house where the baby was kidnapped. You just got your notification? Oh, God. Freaking YouTube. I got to figure out that. 2 overlapping toes is hardly deformed. Not in Lindbergh's mind. Thanks, Patty. They should be able to click on that link. If you click on that link, it'll take you there later. If you have to go through this later, and I'll also put the link in the comments, but sometimes it takes a while to do it because this has to upload to YouTube. Yeah, remember when there had been a couple of false alarms, and a couple months before John Bonet was kidnapped, Charles Lindbergh had staged a prank kidnapping a few months before. That blows my mind. That totally blows my mind. And that does remind me of John Bonet a little bit. Even though I think John Bonet was just like you, Professor, I believe you know exactly how John Bonet went down. I think that's you talk about two writers writing a confession note. It's Patsy and John. Lindy was a wicked soul. And Lindy had some stuff going on in his head. Sure, Keith. Yeah, we'd love to have you. We definitely need to do one. We will. We'll do a UFO show. It's a homemade nightshirt. Yeah, I thought they called it like a sleep sack or something, though. This guy talks about it in the video. Kidnapped by George Waller. The wood expert nailed it. Yeah, no pun intended. The wood expert nailed it. Sleep sacks were common back then. Yes. She says kidnapped by George Waller. I think I've heard of it. And he was so public. Yes. Very. Yeah, the boards were from his attic. The boards were from Houtman's attic. Hey, Evan, how are you? Good seeing you again. Avery with the Japanese accent may sound like Averly. Maybe a Mikado and joke between Dawn and Paul. Okay, could have been. You know, the 14 in the Halloween card, wasn't there? What do they call them? There was 14 Golden Works by Gilbert and Sullivan. They were called I think the Golden Works. There was 14 operettas by Gilbert and Sullivan. So 14 might have been an important number to the Zodiac. Also, it wasn't even fully extended, only 2 sections, nowhere near the windowsill. Maybe that's why they dropped the baby. You would think the letters were written by ALA, but then were penned by Snook or DC before being mailed. I like how plate C ties it all in. I love how plate C definitely ties it all in. Rail 16. I think you're right. I think it is 16. Rail 16 was the one that was the matching rail. No muddy footprints, no adult fingerprints in the room at all. But the maid was home, right? Maybe the maid handed the baby off. You know what? I hate to say it, but I agree. I agree with that statement right there. That's all I'm going to tell you. It's disgusting. It's weird. And you can't believe people could do that, but that's where all roads will take you with John Bonet. Unfortunately, it's weird. And then you'll hear things about John Ramsey that he's the nicest guy in the world. When Patsy was getting cancer treatment, they met another couple, and I think the wife had some pretty advanced cancer, and they didn't have a lot of money, and they were struggling to pay for the doctor's visits. The health insurance didn't cover anything, and John Ramsey stepped up and paid for this pretty much a stranger's cancer treatments. So it's weird how somebody that could do such a great gesture on one hand could be so wicked on the other, but it exists. I can't explain it, how they could turn one on and one off, but I totally believe that about John Ramsey. I think there was a side of him that was very generous and caring, and then had this other bad side. I don't know. And I think there's something weird going back to Don Paw, who was Patsy's father, very high up Freemason. Go look at Don Paw's gravestone on Find a Grave, and it's got the double-headed Masonic eagle. He was very high up in the West Virginia Masonic circles, because you got to be pretty much to have more than just your usual square and compass on your grave as a Freemason. He had the double eagle, and I think it's slightly different between the 32nd degree Mason and 33rd degree. I know Professor Horn would know, but I think there's something going on there between how John Ramsey ever even got his money for his company. That was all set up by Patsy's father, who wasn't wealthy. He was not a wealthy man, but he was very well connected. Not wealthy, but well connected. I mean, both his daughters were Miss West Virginias, and let's face it, Patsy or her sister were not the best looking girls in town. I'm sorry. They weren't. Even back in the day, they were not the best looking girls in town, but both of them, I believe, were Miss West Virginias. That guy was connected big time, and he's the one that funded John Ramsey's company. He found the money for that. And supposedly he pulled the whole thing off while the whole house was awake. No TV, no radio. I don't think Stevie invented then. Stevie invented then. I can't remember. I think the letters were cogitated by DC. I think he cogitated on them. We need a quirky time. Brian, the wife and the maid were both home. Charles came into the house and was acting odd. That's after the baby was already kidnapped. I mean, I didn't find out till when, like in the morning, or I don't remember. Every book looks their favorite Zodiac Killer suspect. Since each murder does not fit each Zodiac suspect, we should look at how the suspect might have known each other. Hey, we agree. I'll speak for Professor Horn and myself. We 100% agree. We love making connections. That's for sure. And the one guy I cannot get. I know that Jerome likes Panzarella a lot. Panzarella is an interesting guy, super smart. The one, oh, you know something, Jerome? I don't know if you're still watching or not. You may have gone to bed and you'll rewatch it later. I saw where the official forming of the corporation of Science Dynamics, which was Cindy Panzarella's company, was August 1st, 1969. And that's interesting because that's could have been when the debut of Zodiac Letter was written. This is the Zodiac speaking, because I think it shows up on what, August 3rd or the 4th. Could have been written on the 1st. The first letter show up at the end of July. So the birth of the Zodiac happens right around that date of August 1st, 1969. Of course, Lake Herman Road was December 20th of 68. But the first time you've heard the Zodiac, this is the Zodiac speaking. He exists. He's created now. Would have been right about August 1st of 69. And that's when Sandy Panzarella formed his company, Science Dynamics, which went on to be a big, huge medical billing company that eventually got bought out by General Dynamics for tons of money. Panzarella was a multi-millionaire. And of course, Cheney worked for him for a while and then left after a year or so, which makes zero sense when your close friend is making millions of dollars hand over fist and you got a gravy job hiring and firing and putting ads in the paper for a pretty good living, I'm sure, because his friend's not going to underpay him. There's no way. But why would you leave that cushy job? But it is interesting that Science Dynamics was officially formed as a for-profit corporation on August 1st, 1969. So there you go, Jerome. Run with it. With regards to John Bonet, how come the brothers never come out with his comments? I know he was on Dr. Phil. Burke Ramsey was on the Dr. Phil show. I don't really remember what he says. I know another guy that covers John Bonet a lot, and people basically believe that Burke didn't even know about it. You know, they have this whole theory about that maybe he killed her and the parents covered it up. I don't. I honestly don't think he knew about it. I think he was asleep. Maybe he was drugged to not wake up during all that commotion. Hammer toe is not that hard to correct unless hammer toe deformities that can develop as a result of various root causes, including neurological conditions like cerebral palsy and CMT. Yeah, maybe the baby was worse off than people knew. And then people that don't believe that Lindbergh could have been involved in his own child's abduction and later murder or accidental death would believe it more. The spider web wasn't touched, but sure, an intruder. Yeah, the spider web wasn't touched. And of course, she's talking about John Bonet. But having hammer toes corrected would be admitting he wasn't perfect. Great point, Professor. And there is no way the media wouldn't broadcast it. That is so true. They would have absolutely broadcasted that, and Lindbergh wouldn't be able to stand that. That's a good point. We're onto something here. We're getting places. Hey, Robert. Corky woke up your sleeping cat. One of the car dealerships, the real Charles Manson, bought some dune buggies from Zodiac Motors in Vallejo. There was a Zodiac Motors in Vallejo? How would I not know that? I know there was a Ford model Zodiac, but I've never heard there was a Zodiac Motors in Vallejo. Maybe Alan was there changing oil. Even bleeding heart liberals had to shut their handicapped kids away. Sold dune buggies. I gotta find an ad for that. I've never seen that. Was it in the early 70s? You had Glenn Reinhardt working down there, and the whole cast of freaks. 1969. See something? You learn something new every night. I did not know it. You got one on me there. I'd never heard there was a Zodiac Motors in Vallejo. I gotta look that up for sure. Let me see. I think there was something else in here. So yeah, there's that website again. Many Faces of Zodiac, Aleister Crowley influence on the Zodiac murders. And the little list. Oh, I forgot to read this gentleman's comment. Food for thought. Mount Diablo stands for D. The 0 can be used for O. North N, you have dawn. I love emails like that. And this is the other thing I was going to mention. Going back to that map that Stefan did. Let me go back here. So this is the constellation of Cancer, and sometimes it's presented with this extra star in it. Here, of course, the way Stefan was showing is starting at Lake Berryessa, coming down to Lake Herman Road. Yeah, Blue Rock Springs Park. You have the tip of Mount Diablo, and then you're coming off down here to the Presidio, of course, the sign of the Paul Stein killing. But some of these have this extra mark right there, and I pointed out to Stefan that if you have this one with this extra point, that line coming off of Blue Rock Springs and heading straight over to the top of Mount Diablo, you pick up Don Cheney's rooftop where he lived in 1967 on Halifax Way, and it lines up perfectly. See, there's Halifax Way here on this left side, and there's the Zodiac logo I drew over the top of Mount Diablo, but that line will go straight through. Halifax Way is a short little street. That arc will go straight over that point. And there are some with Cancer. Now, I don't know why Cheney would pick Cancer. He's not a Cancer. He was April 25th, 1934. I don't know why the constellation of Cancer, but I think Stefan even said that was really a crazy coincidence that line will go straight over Cheney's house. And Tony Dinelli, you sent me, I forgot to put that slide up, Tony. You showed a picture of the view that Cheney would have had from Halifax Way and Concord, California. How like what from that street, what Mount Diablo looked like. You had just a commanding view because he was by the freeway. I think it was a little higher up, and you just had this great view of Mount Diablo from that house. Hold on, Tony. Zodiac Motors, Zodiac Enterprises in South San Francisco. That's one I didn't know. I see a dual parallel. DC goes to the authorities in ALA, and Blaine goes to the authorities on Geic. It all smells of conspiracy to muddy the waters for investigators. Yeah, even Richard Grinnell, who doesn't have a suspect. I think Richard likes the idea, kind of like what Morpher did, trying to find suspects that live by the payphone at Tuolumne Springs and stuff like that. But I know Richard did mention that two of the craziest synchronicities to him were, one, the guy showing up in the cipher, the GYKE showing up in the cipher, and then Don Cheney having a relative with the last name Paradise with the funny spelling were his two craziest synchronicities. People get hot during summer, tempers flare. Maybe Don's did. Yeah, maybe he was having some friction with his wife, as he liked to call it. Don always was having too much friction with his wife, which always makes me think of the Zodiac friction tape letter, which was, I think it was tape. It was like an electrical kind of tape, but it would give you better grip. And I always wonder if the knife at Lake Berryessa had that white tape around it for a better grip, what was named in that letter called friction tape. And remember in that letter, he said, you can find my name on cases of Scotch tape all throughout wherever. It was the 3M Scotch tape. And of course it said it was made in Minneapolis, St. Paul. St. Paul. Who's named St. Paul in this case, Jerome? Santo Panzarella literally translates to St. Paul. I know it's one of Jerome's favorites. But I thought you'd like that deal, Jerome, about August 1st, 1969, the birth of science dynamics. And I cannot find it again. I look for their logo. They had four different logos, and one is similar to a Zodiac cross circle for science dynamics. It was, and there was it's like a box of four different symbols. And Panzarello's a electrical engineer. That's why he was able to come up with computer billing systems for the medical industry, because there was no future in that. Chris, ALA drove one, and Carmen Gia, Don knew that too. He played Alan like a fiddle. Yeah, I think he did. I think another thing he probably held on him was he probably knew he murdered his neighbor, Mr. White. Yeah, and Alan had a Carmen Gia when he died, and that was his prized possession, was that Carmen Gia that in his will was given to his best friend Glenn Reinhardt. It was not given to the Seawaters, unfortunately. It was given to his best friend Glenn Reinhardt, who always maintained that Alan was innocent. Of course, he had a hard time defending Alan's history with molesting kids. Karate Dave Baker was born in Vallejo. Wow. And of course, Jeff Gordon, the NASCAR driver, is from Vallejo because his uncle knew Darlene. Dean Farron's father was an electronics engineer at Mare Island, where Leo Swinton was a machinist. They both worked on nuclear subs, etc. Yeah, I bet a lot of those guys crossed paths. I know Arthur Lee Allen's grandfather was a York Rite Freemason that was all made up of a lot of people from Mare Island and the Vallejo chapter of the York Rite Masons. I don't think Allen's father was Ethan Warren Allen. Yes, please remember to hit that like button. Oh, and next week I'm doing something different. It is going to be the usual Zodcast night, maybe a little early, I'm not sure with, but I'm going to have a guy on named Mark Barbary, and we're going to be talking about something totally different, but it is, in my mind, crime related, and it's about a junior high school, and my sisters actually went to this junior high, and we believe, Mark and I do, and some others, that when they built this school back in the 70s, that they used some very toxic materials building the school, and then it caused a lot of the students who attended the school to get sick years later with things like MS, Parkinson's, some cancers, and a lot of autoimmune diseases from kids that went to the school. And this isn't like a money grab or anything like that. It's just stories never really gotten out. There's scant little about it on the internet. And I'm going to have a video, a shorter video about, the basics of what happened. But Mark is kind of the clearinghouse for it. He went to this school as well. It's called Wilkerson Intermediate School in the Woodlands, Texas. And this is going to be a big story to me. And I know like for usual Zodiac people or whatever, please watch this show next week with Mark. You'll see the advertisement for it, but tune in the same night. It might be a little earlier because this is usually at 8:30, but this could be maybe at 8 instead of 8:30, but definitely be looking for that because this is going to be huge. It's extremely important show. And this is, it's kind of a departure from some of this material, but I think it's crime related because I think they knew what they did and they couldn't admit it years later. But please tune into that show. Clue, Dungeon, done. Sandy Color. Who do we know named Sandy? Yes, good. Tony's always finding good little clues like that. And my favorite is still Tony as Patter Ned, Pater Ned, Patter father. Father is Ned. My father is Ned. Zodiac saying Patter Ned. My father is Ned. Don Chaney's father is Ned. Not Ned DeHaan, but Ned Chaney. Hey, Jet. Nancy, wow, Nancy Pittman's dad worked on missile guidance systems. Paul Avery's stepfather, Howard Malcolm Avery, was a naval ordnance guy who traveled around doing all that. And it wasn't Sherry Joe Bates' father? Wasn't he a naval ordnance guy? Those two could have crossed paths. Not that I think Bates was Zodiac, but it all kind of ties in. I think Sherry Joe Bates' father did something with the Navy with I got weapons. Planes or weapons, something like that. Zodiac is like Son of Sam. The links aren't between the victims, it's between their parents. Oh, I love stuff like that, Professor. I love the stuff with I think Vern Jensen is one that how much do you know about Vern Jensen? Betty Lou Jensen's father. He was Navy, of course, pretty high up. I always wondered more about Vern Jensen. I wish I knew more about him. If the parents tie in, I want to definitely know more about Vern Jensen's. I don't know a whole lot about Faraday's father. I don't know that much about David Faraday's father. Was he military? No. Faraday's father worked for Pacific PPG, the energy company or whatever in California. I don't think Faraday's father was military, but Betty Lou's was. Vern Jensen was pretty high up in the Navy, as was Arthur Lee Allen's father flew jets in the Navy. He was a machinist, but for the Navy. Yeah, see here, Colonel Jensen was former Army chemical weapons, and that is interesting how the parents tie in like that. I mean, yeah, there's a lot of Navy in Vallejo because of the Naval Yard, but these guys were higher up in it. So Paul Avery's biological father and his stepfather were both pretty high up in the Navy, both stationed in Hawaii, didn't live far from each other. Avery's born in the same hospital as Barack Obama and Arthur Lee Allen. All three of those guys were born in the same little hospital in Hawaii. That's how Jensen got his job at PG&E. See, I remembered right. Yeah, that's how Jensen got his job at PG&E. Yes, ALA and Avery were born in the same hospital, the same one as Obama, whatever it was called. Oh, Jim's brother worked in Corona. That's interesting. Yeah, Corona not far from where Jensen was. Yeah, I wish they could have interviewed Crabtree a little more. I'm gonna look up Zodiac Motors. Yeah, we definitely. I wish I knew more about the connections. Cheney's cousin was a naval pilot who got killed in a training accident in the 40s. I always wondered if there was a tie there between him and Vern Jensen or anybody else, but it was his cousin got killed with I think it was a crew of 5 in the San Francisco Bay. The plane, whatever plane was carrying him, crashed into the San Francisco Bay, killing all 5, including Cheney's cousin. Really tragic. Let's see if I'm just making sure I didn't miss anything. Yeah, I agree with Professor, though. Parents definitely tie in. There was a Vern Jensen that lived in Bakersfield back in the day. I always wondered if it was the same Vern Jensen before they moved to Vallejo. I do remember, and I did a show about this once, that there was somebody living with Allen's family when they were younger, and they wound up moving to Bakersfield and knew Cheney's family really well. I cannot remember who the person was, and they owned a motel in Bakersfield, but they were living with the Allens when this person was living with the Allens when they were younger before they got married and moved to Bakersfield. Obama was born in Kenya, Africa. News referred to him as the Kenyan senator of Illinois. He's now scrubbed from the net. True. Dr. Oda's younger brother crashed his F-84 spy plane in Bavaria on their father's birthday, 1951. That's a good one. Arthur Lee Allen's father was in a crash. I can't remember. I was looking at it the other day. I think maybe in Texas, but he got hurt pretty bad. Ethan Warren Allen, who was a stud pilot. I mean, just a stud pilot. But after that, they said he was never the same. I mean, it almost killed him, and he was very, very shy, and he was very, it totally changed him from this really, gung ho, wiry. Because Allen's father was very, very thin, wiry, energetic guy, and he wasn't, all the way up until his death. But after he got in that plane crash, he was. It totally changed his whole personality. Became very standoffish. His wife kind of ruled the whole thing, and he just kind of took a back seat. I think it had a big time effect on the family. Yes, PTSD. Tony, I know you know about PTSD as a Vietnam combat medic. I think the PTSD played a lot into. I think Ted Braden had already had PTSD from World War II before he saw insane amount of action in Vietnam. I think it totally warped his mind. I think he became I think Braden had so much PTSD that he just gave up on fearing death. That's my theory of Braden. Chris Herman's dad was a machinist engineer at Perkin Elmer making spy satellites. Yeah, it's amazing how it all ties in. It was on the Wayback Machine. Yeah, they scrubbed it and you had to go find it on the Wayback Machine. Somebody showed a thing about Obama. I thought it was what was his name? The guy they thought was his was it Marshall? They thought was Obama's biological father. Marshall with his mother, Dunham. Dunham is his mother, right? From Kansas. But I thought Frank Marshall wasn't. They believe that Frank Marshall. This was something else where there was this other guy that was part of some kind of cultish group that headed up this group that looked exactly like Obama. But I always thought his father was Frank Marshall, or supposed to be Frank Marshall. Yeah, we're really getting off the trail now. I think that's it for now, everybody. This is a great show. Thanks everybody for showing up. Tony, Professor Horan, Jerome, Plate C, Fasting Star, everybody. Some people I haven't seen before. Of course, Patty, keeping it real, keeping everybody moving and engaged. Definitely, Keith, I hope you're feeling better. Thanks for tuning in, Keith. I know you'll probably watch the race later. Bong Donkey, thanks for tuning in too. I'll put your comment up because I missed it. Aleister Crowley had a Salima Abbey in your hometown of Cefalu, Sicily. Wow. I didn't know that. Thanks, Chris. I'm glad the audio got better. I was worried after I played it. Hey, Tyler, I missed you earlier. Hey, Steven. And I hope you can finish it later. Hey, Pedro. You were protesting a Vietnam demonstration. Okay. Yes, the flying V guitar that Michael had was very cool. But everybody definitely tune in and look out. I'm going to put a video out tomorrow night on that thing I'm talking about with the school. And I mean, talk about a cover up. That'll be out. Yeah, have a good night, Anthony. Thanks, Keith. Yeah, Corky's got to give one out. So hopefully your cat's not. Sure, Keith. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Don't miss that video on Release tomorrow night. Just a regular video, won't be live. And then live show next Sunday night is going to be with Mark Barbary talking about the poisoning of students at Wilkerson Intermediate. But thanks for tuning in, everybody.